Morning, church. So last fall, I was speaking at a church in Peachtree City, Georgia, and a delightful place. I was eating dinner one night in the church parking lot, big group of people, and one of their shepherds came and sat at the table, and we started talking. His name is Steve, and he had just retired from being a veterinarian. So I asked him, what is the most interesting thing that happened to you as a vet? And he immediately responded, oh, well, it's got to be the African gray. Well, I had no idea what an African gray was, but just the speed of his response told me this was going to be a good story. So here was the story. He mainly works with dogs and cats, but he had one particular client that had an Amazon gray, so he would board this bird every once in a while. The unique thing about this particular kind of parrot is that not only does it learn to mimic words and language, what separates it from other parrots is that it learns the fastest. So if you had this bird for 24 hours, it would start saying what you said. So they board this bird, and first night, one of the workers goes in where all the animals are, turns the lights off, and says, night, night. Next day, family comes in, tragedy. Their dog has been hit by a car, it's not going to make it. So the vet gets the shot. He's in the process of putting the dog down. Family's in the room sobbing, and out of the back room, everyone hears, night, 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 night. Bird won't stop. So the vet tells the worker to go back there and throw a blanket on the cage, which the worker does, and that only makes the bird talk louder. Next day, worker brings a large 80-pound dog into the back room. And this Amazon gray says, sit. Dog sits. No joke, bird says, lay down, lay down. Dog lays down, bird says, roll over. Dog rolls over. And then as if the bird had practiced for months, the bird finishes off with this. Good boy, good boy. A creature that weighs 8 ounces had authority over another creature that weighed 80 pounds, and that happened because of words. Isn't that strange? Words do carry immense weight in the world. If that's what they can do in the animal kingdom, imagine what they can do through believers in Jesus Christ inspired by the Holy Spirit. Words matter. Words on the lips of a lawyer can bring freedom or justice for an individual. Words on the pen of an author can create universes. Words on the mouth of a loved one can bring you the greatest joy in the world, and they can also break your heart. Consider words like I do, or guilty as charged, or it's malignant, or I love you. Words carry weight. Here's how Solomon puts it in the book of Proverbs. He says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords. And then on the flip side, he says, gracious words are sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Yes, words matter. So today we're starting a new series. It's called Love Your Neighbor. This is actually the final arm of a 9-month study we've had on love one another. In the fall, we talked about love your enemies. This spring, we've really focused on relationships with the last series. And now we're going to focus on the outward turn. How do you love your neighbor? And you would think with a title like this that the implication is we're going to do this through actions, and that's actually true. Later in the series, we'll talk about that. But I'd like to begin the series very specifically talking about how do you love your neighbor through words. Easter Sunday's in 2 weeks. And every year that's an opportunity to bring people into this place where they might experience something really profound because of the Holy Spirit, because of Scripture, because of worship, because of the church. But that starts often with an invitation. and invitations require words. And so I'd like to reflect for a few minutes on the power of words this morning. Luke 10 is a really significant chapter in the New Testament. There's three iconic stories in this chapter. You've got Mary, Martha at the end. You've got the Good Samaritan in the middle. You've got the sending of the 72 at the beginning, which is really interesting to think about the structure of that chapter. Mary, Martha is more about being. Good Samaritan's more about doing. Sending of the 72 is more about telling. Be, do, tell. That's a shorthand way of saying live good lives and do good works and share good news. If you think about our mission statement, it's actually all over the Bible. And so I want to zoom into this very first paragraph from Luke chapter 10. Jesus says this, or after the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. Now here's Jesus talking. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves." So much to be said about this famous, iconic, missional passage. I want to start with something really minor. Why 72? Luke's the only one to record this particular version of the story. 72? What's up with that number? I mean, 3 is a big number, 7 is a big number in the Bible, 12 is a big number in the Bible, 144. 72? Where does this even come from? There's actually an Old Testament echo that helps us understand what Jesus is doing here. So go back in time, Old Testament, Moses has led the people out of Egypt. They're in the middle of the wilderness, and the grumbling is full throttle. Moses is overwhelmed. And so here's what happens in Numbers 11. The Lord said to Moses, "Bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting where they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. They will share the burden of the people with you so that you will not have to carry it alone." And then skipping down to verse 25, when the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied. Isn't that a wonderful text? So in other words, he's really been doing it all. He's been the primary torch bearer of the proclamation of the mission of God in this season of Israel's life. He's the one that goes toe-to-toe with Pharaoh. He's the one that raises his staff and parts the Red Sea. He's the one that goes up on Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments and brings them down. He's the one that's going to God on behalf of the people when the people rebel. So it's Moses, Moses, Moses. But here God is saying, okay, it's time, Israel. You've got to step up. No longer can this be a one-man show. It's about time it becomes a team sport. So you are starting to put the dots together on why this story in Numbers 11 might be significant to what Jesus is saying in Luke chapter 10. Now, some of you are right with me. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. And others of you, you've noticed a detail, and you're like, no, I'm not having it. And you're already ready to talk to me after the sermon, because Jesus sent 72, right? But in Numbers 11, it wasn't 72, right? It was what? 70. So I'm actually glad that for those of you who are thinking that you were thinking that. Look at this. Still Numbers 11, verse 26. However, 2 men whose names were Eldad and Medad, those are great names, by the way, had remained in the camp. They were listed among the elders, but they did not go out to the tent, and yet the Spirit also rested on them, and they prophesied in the camp. So you got 2 guys that don't come to the meeting, and yet the Spirit of God still goes to them, and they start prophesying. So now let's do the math. 70 plus 72, or 70 plus 2 is 72. So now you can understand this is the backdrop for why Jesus is sending out 72 people in the New Testament. So in other words, in the Old Testament, God needs people to step up. Like, it's time. You can't just rely on Moses. It's your job now. Even for the 2 people that skipped class and think, well, I don't really have to do it. No, you're going to do it too. And so in the New Testament, this is exactly the same reason that Jesus is sending out the 72. It is time for people, not just special apostle people, but for any of these disciples. It's time for all of them to step up. Or think about this. At the beginning of Jesus' ministry in Luke 4, he comes onto the scene primarily doing 2 things. Chapter 4, we read, he healed and he preached. In chapter 9, Jesus sends out the 12 apostles, and they symbolically function as the new Israel, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles. Jesus sends them out on their mission trip, and guess what they're supposed to do? The same 2 things. Jesus told them, I want you to preach the kingdom of God, and I want you to heal the sick. Now again, that's the 12, chapter 9. But now we're in 10, and he's sending out 72, and guess what his instructions are to the 72? It's the exact same. In verse 9, he says, heal the sick who are there and tell them the kingdom of God is near you. So it goes from Jesus, this is my mission, I'm going to heal and I'm going to preach, and then the 12 disciples, what's their mission? They're supposed to heal and they're supposed to preach, and then it gets to the 72, the masses, and what's their mission? Well, they're supposed to heal and they're supposed to preach. In other words, the call is for all. Like everybody is called to do this. Nobody gets a free pass on sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And so what do I mean by call? In this passage or in this chapter, the call of Jesus is 2 things. It's actions and words. It's good news and it's good deeds. So think on the good deeds side of things, or good works, think Good Samaritan, think ministry. That is our call. And in subsequent weeks, we'll talk about that. But we're also called to speak words. I mean, this is what Jesus is talking about here. 72 people, you go tell people. Like, this is real people talking to real communities in real time, and this is what we're supposed to do. Whether that's proclamation, where you're declaring the gospel, or invitation, where you're asking someone to come to church with you, or conversation, where you're just having deep dialogue about spiritual things with somebody else, that we're called to this. That's what the word call means, or at least in this context. And when I say the word all, what I mean there is that this call is not just for those who are educated, or those who are confident, or those who are brave, or those who went to seminary, or some theological school, or those who just feel really outgoing and extroverted and love to be with people all the time. No, the call is for every single one of us. Every disciple, of every age, of every personality, with every background, is called to use words to bring other people to Jesus. And I think it's time that the church repents and reclaims this as our mission. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that most Christians I know believe that sharing their faith is important. The bad news is that they think it's important for somebody else. Well, somebody should talk to that person. You know, somebody should start a Bible study at this place. Someone should reach out to that particular person and invite them to church. Somebody should preach a sermon on X, because Phil's not doing it. When was the last time that somebody should got anything done? It doesn't work. Nothing happens when we go down the route of somebody should. And I get it, we're hesitant, and honestly, it's not just us. It's most Christians in the country feel this hesitancy. So, for example, Barna did this really interesting survey. They did it in 2015 and also 2023. They asked a bunch of church leaders a few questions. One question was, how effective is your church at spiritual formation? So 2015, 14% of church leaders responded with very effective. 2023, that was virtually the same, about 12%, which is sad. It's a very low number, but that's the percentage of church leaders that thought their church was very effective at spiritual formation. But this is the question that's really sad. So in 2015, the question was asked, how effective is your church at reaching out to unchurched people? And in 2015, 13% of church leaders said, yeah, we're very effective at that. Fast forward to 2023, 1% of church leaders said that, yes, our church is very effective at reaching out to unchurched people. So this means that 99% of church leaders, generally Protestant churches in the country, believe that their church is not effective at reaching out to unchurched people. And so I get it. There's a hesitancy here. So I feel like what's happening is there's a tension amongst many Christians, and the tension is something like this. We do believe the call is real, and it's true, and it's clear from Jesus. Like, I don't know many Christians that say, well, the Great Commission doesn't really matter. So the call to speak is clear, but the reticence, it's real. We feel it. In fact, I might just ask you to think in your own mind, for you personally, what is it that makes you think, yeah, I just don't want to do that? So for you, maybe it's that you just don't know what to say. You don't feel like you're knowledgeable enough about the Bible. Or maybe for you, it's just you're not confident. Or maybe for you, it's you don't really want to take the social risk. But I'm friends with this person. If I brought it up, maybe that would change things. Or it could be for you that you think that if you were to say anything, you would be thought of as offensive. I don't want to be one of those Christians. That's why the country doesn't really like Christians, is because we're always talking about our faith. I don't want to do that, so I guess I won't say anything at all. So what would you say it is for you? I try to stay up to date on trends within the country and within Christianity as best I can, reading and listening to good podcasts. And there's been two podcasts that have been really helpful the last few months. The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God that Justin Brierley hosts. And then there's a podcast called Truth Over Tribe. And both of these podcasts have talked a lot in the last few months about a shift in the feel of our culture towards Christianity. And so I want to share a few examples. I do think this has implications for how we use our words. So one particular person that's been talked a lot about in various circles is someone named Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She, most of her life, was not just an atheist, but a prominent, renowned atheist, up there with Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens of the world. Well, in the last 2 years, she has left atheism, come to belief in some kind of a God, and then even from that has this full-stop conversion to Orthodox Christianity. And it's amazing to hear her talk about that in secular circles. She's a very, very well-known person. Another example would be a guy named Tom Holland, arguably the leading secular historian on planet Earth. He's a historian, and he's done so much research into so many different parts of history. Well, one of the really interesting things that he brought to the table a few years ago, he wrote this massive book called Dominion, and it basically makes the case that whether you believe it's true or not, there is no other movement that has done more for the better of Western civilization and the world than Christianity, especially when it comes to things like human rights and just the development of civilization. So again, this is a secular person saying, hey, Christianity is a really, really, really good thing. Or the most popular podcast on earth is Joe Rogan. And historically, he's been pretty critical of Christians. He's had people on his podcast who are Christians, and he can be a little belittling and judgmental towards those weak-minded people. But recently, it was a few months ago, he had a world-renowned scholar, Wesley Hill, on, who talked about evidence for the resurrection. And I listened to the whole thing, and it was amazing. Rogan was not, there was a shift in Rogan. There was an openness. In fact, the word that Joe Rogan said the most on that 3-hour episode was the word wow. And it wasn't out of sarcasm. It was a genuine, oh, I just didn't know that there was that much evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. So again, there's a shift. It's very subtle right now happening in culture. Now, I got to ask for forgiveness. I'm about to say something that some of you are going to be really angry about. And so I need you to remember, last fall I preached a whole sermon series called Love Your Enemies. But here's what I need to talk about. College football championship, Ohio State won. So I know many of us are still back in the days of Baker Mayfield with the flag in the middle. That's where I am as well. But Ohio State won. They had deep faith. And in the post-game analysis with Scott Van Pelt and others talking about the Ohio State football team, they talked a lot about the faith of these athletes, like in-depth Bible studies, baptisms, and ESPN did this whole segment on it. That's a change. Like a few years ago when Coco Gauff won the U.S. Open, she was clearly on her knees praying, but ESPN, at least at the time, they did not even want to acknowledge that. Oh, she's just taking in the moment. No, she's not. She's praying. Well, something shifted. There's more of an openness to talking about and listening to stories of faith, stories about Jesus. Now, do I believe Ohio State football team are Christian? No, of course not, because I don't like Ohio State. Of course. They are. This doesn't mean that people are just coming back to church in droves yet. And this doesn't mean that the whole country is undergoing this massive demographics shift where lots and lots of people are coming to faith in Jesus. It doesn't mean that yet, but what it does mean is that for those of us that have this fear of I can't say anything, that's not as well grounded as it used to be. So sure, you might not know what to say, but the reality is your friends, your neighbors, the people you go to your gym with, your coworkers, they're not going to be as frustrated or antagonistic or dismissive of you as you think they might be. People are very open. They're open to hearing about the Lord. They're open to invitations to church. And so if we always just shell up and say, well, I just can't, it's just not me. I just can't do that. Well, then no one's going to hear about Jesus. And so I'd like you to go ahead and start thinking about like who is someone that you feel like you could have a conversation with? Who's someone that you could invite to church here in a few weeks? This really can happen. I'll give you a few examples. Examples of it not going poorly. A few weeks ago, I had an hour-long conversation with a full-fledged agnostic. She doesn't believe there's a God, but the conversation wasn't combative. I asked her some hard questions. She really cares deeply about the poor, and she wants to feed the hungry. And so I inquired of her about how does that work without a belief in God? And it was a healthy dialogue. You can do this. You don't have to know everything to be able to talk to somebody. A few nights ago at the Oklahoma Christian Gala, Patty Grisso, OU softball coach, did an incredible job talking about how she has developed this culture in the OU softball program of talking about your faith. And these are 18, 19, 20-year-old girls, and it's transformed the entire program, and it's amazing the ripple effects of those girls sharing their faith. I had lunch with one of our members last week, and he was telling me that he used to go to his gym with his earbuds in, but he's decided just about a year ago to take them out and talk to people. And he recently started a Bible study with these people that go to his gym. So this can happen. Like it just takes normal people being open to others. So for everybody that's anxious about talking to someone about something deeper, or maybe you feel guilty because I haven't done this in years and I got to step up to the plate, or maybe you're just afraid about what someone's going to think if you were to bring something up, whatever it is, I think it's time that we reclaim the confidence that the enemy has taken from us for at least a generation. If the world's open to hearing, then we might as well be open to speaking. In fact, I'd like you to watch this story of this happening to one of our families this past year.
It was June of 2013. We had recently moved here from West Virginia. I was at Sprouts doing some grocery shopping. I was loading the groceries in the parking lot. This very kind lady approached me.
The thing that caught my attention was the license plate on the car. It was West Virginia. So I thought, well, I'll go see if this person has recently moved here and tell her about the boxes class.
I was receptive to it because I thought that's a wonderful program to have for somebody who's new to the area because I didn't know anything about it. This is my first time at this grocery store, and I just loved the idea of a class like that.
The boxes class is not really a Bible study. In fact, it is not a Bible study. It brings women together who are in a new place and they don't have any friends. So what happens is we have a group of women and they're all in the same boat. And they come and they make friends with each other. And they need to know, where's the post office? Where can you get the best groceries?
But I remember walking through the doors and just having this peace. And there were all these women there welcoming me and hugging, and they knew who I was. And it was just a really nice feeling to feel like I'd come home, but to a new home. It was very calm.
I was first introduced to the tellers by the ladies in the boxes class, at least Elizabeth. They had kind of said she had been coming to the boxes class and was interested in learning more about faith and church.
We wanted to place membership, so we signed up for the Inside Story class, and John and Elizabeth just happened to have signed up at the same time.
I loved getting to know Elizabeth because they had 2 children recently. I think their youngest was a toddler still. Mm-hmm. And so that was just so great. Seeing her, and she kind of walked through the pregnancy with me because we were with each other every Sunday.
I had never been baptized. I did not grow up attending church. I would go sporadically with friends. It was weighing on me that I felt like it was something I needed to do, especially as I was walking in faith. And I was like, there's this extra step that I felt like I needed to do.
It just felt like the right thing to do, right? It's like you better reaffirm yourself in a way that your heart actually starts to follow behind what the actions are.
I just remember after I emerged, I felt this lightness. It was just, I almost felt like I was floating. It was just a wonderful feeling.
I felt incredibly nervous. And it's, you come up and, there's the person who's kind of instructing you and led you along the way. So Terry Fisher was the one who baptized us. And, it's nice, the first thing you get is you get a hug from him.
And so when we went to our Bible class, John and Elizabeth tried it at the same time, so it was like familiar people to us. Yeah. And our Bible class was doing 4x4s where we would meet at people's house to have dinners.
That was the next step that I think was really valuable.
We got pulled into a Q group. All of that we wouldn't have done on our own.
I think the Bible class was really key, pushing you to go kind of past the first step of acquaintances, and we're sort of friendly, and okay, let's sit down and eat together. Let's have some formal structure of how we're going to get together outside of church.
This church is probably as close to an anchor as what we'd have in the state of Oklahoma, period. Even to this day, it's kind of been a fixture of, our existence here.
Just a simple invitation. Look where it led our family. It's amazing. It wasn't anything that had to be formal or overthought or elaborate. It was just a genuine invitation.
When we have something of value to offer, and particularly something that's non-threatening, it's not too difficult just to invite someone, tell them about it, and say, would you be interested?
It's important to be an inviter because Jesus was an inviter. He wanted to pull people in because he knows that he's the way, he's the truth, and he's the life. If we will live lives of inviting others, then they can come to know something special in their life that they've never known before.
In every story, I think there's various people who have come along and planted or watered, and God, of course, ultimately gives the increase. But it's very important that everyone's involved in doing it in their way.
Isn't that an amazing story? Just incredible. One of the things I like the most about it is not everybody has to say everything. Whether it was the boxes class or Bible study or inviting someone to church, everybody played their role. And then as Terry said at the end, we have to trust that God's going to give the increase, but you don't have to do everything. But I do think we're all called to do something. Jesus said the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So we don't have a harvest problem, we have a workers problem. So I challenge you to step it up.